Hello and welcome to the third podcast from Nordic Viola on our On a Wing and a Prayer project. I'm Katherine Wren, founder of Nordic Viola, and in this series of podcasts I'll be introducing you to the composers I'm working with on the project. The expression on a wing and a prayer means doing something in the hope that you will succeed despite being insufficiently prepared. And for me, it sums up humankind's current approach to the climate crisis. Over the course of the project, I'm exploring changing habitats and species that are struggling, as well as actions by people, both positive and negative, towards the environment, through a series of collaborations between Nordic Viola and composers with a keen interest in their local environment. We are also incorporating traditional music from the far north and music by contemporary Nordic composers whose work complements ours. Since our last podcast, On a Wing and a Prayer D-side with Pete and Joe Stollery has performed at the Barn Bankery, and we've had our first repeat performance at Scottish Music Centre with Renzo Spiteri from Shetland. But today we're focusing on our next performance with Lisa Robertson from Morvern in the West Highlands of Scotland. To lead us through our conversation today, I'll hand you over now to our host, composer and podcaster, Aileen Sweeney.
Welcome back to listeners who've tuned in before, and hello to brand new listeners joining us for episode 3. Today, violist and improviser Katherine Wren is joined by Lisa, a composer and violinist whose music combines sounds from nature and traditional music whilst examining relationships between people and the land, highlighting environmental concerns. It's great to have you both here. How are you doing?
Good, thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Good to be here. So, to kick us off, tell us about the week you spent in Morvern.
Well, we had a great and really inspiring week doing a good range of things which have really fed into the project. So we did a combination of exploring various local habitats and gaining lots of inspiration from that. We did some improvising and project planning, and we also had some great conversations with some local environmental experts. And we concluded the week with a community workshop in Morvern Community Woodlands, which was great and very inspiring as well. Some of the exploring we did and the different places we saw were, well, we started off by having a look at some of the local hydro schemes on a very wet day, which was a very appropriate kind of weather condition to be seeing those in. And then we also went to look at the Rohoy Hills Nature Reserve to see some of the woodlands there specifically. And then we had a great time having a look at some rainforest habitats guided by local expert Alistair Firth.
Sounds like you were busy. Tell me a wee bit more about rainforests, because when I think of rainforests, I don't tend to think of Scotland, but we have rain and we have forests. So what is it about rainforests here that is sort of tripping me up?
I think for me, it actually really struck me when I got off the ferry in Mull, actually on the way over to Morvern, and I went for an evening walk along the seafront. The birds were singing. There were some massive leaves in the forest there, and the rain was really bouncing off those leaves. And it's like, wow, this actually really does sound like we're in a rainforest.
Yeah.
And also, you know, as people who've listened to the podcast before know, usually I'm up north or in the east of Scotland, and even further north, obviously. And this was such a different habitat. It was much milder. It was much greener. And yeah, it really does feel like a lush rainforest.
So what was it that drew you to this particular area for this project?
I think first of all, actually, it was Lisa's music. I've known Lisa and her music for quite a long time, and always wanted to have a good excuse to work with you, actually, Lisa, really. And so that was one of the things. And then I guess the second impetus was actually listening to a programme about the Scottish rainforest with Alistair Firth, who we went on to meet during the week, and nature writer Kathleen Jamie. And that really inspired me and made me think, yeah, I want to explore this area myself and see what there is to learn about it.
And was it nice showing Katherine around your stomping grounds?
It was a wonderful and really unique experience for me having Katherine visit, and it's amazing how having someone visit a place for the first time and me having the opportunity to show Katherine around, it was like seeing the place I've lived all my life from with a fresh pair of eyes, and it was really exciting to get to do that.
Oh wow, that sounds amazing. So you've already mentioned that you met with some experts from the Scottish Wildlife Trust and the Woodland Trust. What did you learn from their experience on the ground?
So much, actually. I mean, first of all, we were really interested in species and habitats that are suffering a bit with climate change, and it's not always in the way you expect. I mean, sometimes it can be too much rain. It can flood bird nests and wipe away their nests. Probably a bigger danger actually is drought if you go for long periods with no rain. And actually the idea that the rainforest to really survive well actually needs a more constant environment. So that was one thing. And then, just learning about regenerating the rainforest and what it needs to survive, and the pressures on it. I don't know whether Lisa wants to talk a little bit about the animal pressures, like the deer stalking and things like that.
Yes, there's certainly a lot of very varied. It's a very complex situation. You couldn't necessarily say it's one thing. I think particularly, so we spoke to Steve Hardy, which was a very inspiring conversation, and hearing about threats from the very high deer population and things that could be done to kind of minimise the risk from that.
What is it about deer populations being high that causes an issue?
So deer tend to basically eat the trees, eat the baby trees. So that's really the problem from that. And
when you're trying to grow back
when there's kind of natural regeneration happening, a lot of the small growing trees tend to get kind of wiped out if there are too many deer around. But it was great hearing about some of the things that the conversations that are happening, and things that have been done already, and kind of ideas of things that could happen, particularly things like targeting certain areas and trying to reduce the numbers there. I think it was, from my takeaway from the chat with Steve, was a lot of positivity as well.
Absolutely.
And the idea of the idea that nature has this potential and is just kind of waiting there, and these small things that we can do just give them the chance to spring back, and they could do so very quickly. There were a few examples of things where one positive change had resulted in a complete kind of burst of regeneration just within a few years.
I was really interested too, like talking to Alistair about crofting a little bit as well, because eating meat gets such a bad press these days because of gas emissions from cattle and things like that. But we were talking about how cattle and sheep also have a role to play in the ecosystem as well. And,
oh really?
Yeah. And so apparently one of the things that's happened is cattle have got bigger for modern farming methods, but if you have more smaller breeds and an appropriate number, and they can actually have a strong role to play in trampling down the ground, so that new growth can get through, eating dead vegetation, things like that. So they can actually be part of the regeneration story. And so it's more a question of humans working to work in a way that feeds us, but still is kind on nature and actually keeps the balance, really. I mean, I suppose it's that thing that has always been farming there, hasn't there?
Yes, I think that feeds into other conversations that we had with, my parents, actually, during the week. I have my mum, Jenny Robertson, being an archaeologist who's worked in Morvern for most of her career.
That's a cool job.
So she's told us that really the land use in Morvern was the same from about 4,000 years BC until big changes happened, I suppose, during the clearances. And
what, really?
Yeah,
that's mad.
And really this kind of crofting method is very reminiscent of that. And I think it shows that kind of historically there was that understanding of what the land needed and the way that humans can sort of help the environment whilst also benefiting, and that it's a really kind of mutually beneficial situation.
Yeah, I think when you were speaking there, Katherine, like one word jumped out at me, which is just balance, because there's so many extremes of like, oh, it's eating meat that's the problem. Oh, it's fuel emissions is the problem, and it's no one thing, and there's no one solution. It's all just a balancing act of getting a sustainable situation that works for everyone.
Very much so. And I should say I have absolutely no agenda on that either, because I choose not to eat meat. So but at the same time I have no problem with people eating it in a sustainable way, and I think sometimes it can be a better choice for where people live. And as you say, it can always be quite a bleak picture that's painted with climate change and weather, but it is reassuring to know that there's positive takeaways, and actually you're seeing on the ground positive changes being made, having an effect. That must be really encouraging, especially for you, Lisa, as someone who is from the area, lives in the area. Have you seen big changes in your lifetime? For listeners who aren't with me and Lisa, I'm saying that as if she's 90 years old. She's really not. But you've spent a few decades
during
there.
My many decades living in Morvern. It's definitely positive changes. I think you can just feel it in the air, feel it in conversations, and I think, Catherine, you noticed it as well. It's
totally.
It's it's a part of the way of life. It's nature is something that you talk about around the dinner table, and it's everything, because we're so absorbed in it, and from that comes a desire to make positive changes and do good things. And we certainly saw a few examples of those things. I mean, the hydro schemes are definitely up there with something that's doing really good things, but also there are restoration projects happening. There's this project happening reintroducing native oysters in the loch, which is helping with the health of the loch, which is really exciting, and a lot of effort is going into protecting the woodlands, and particularly this project which has kind of emerged in the last year or so, which is being run by the RSPB, which is all about saving Morvern's rainforest, and that's provided a real interest in the rainforest locally, and lots of people are engaging with it, and it's doing great positive things, I think.
Yeah, you mentioned the hydro project. Tell us a little bit more about that, because you've got a bit of insider knowledge and actually featured in some of your field recordings as well. So tell us a bit more about that if you can.
Yes, well, it's definitely a big topic in Morvern.
Is it? Yeah.
So yes, Morvern is a very wet place, which was also quite a theme of the week, and very relevant to the fact that we've got the rainforest there as well. But it's also very hilly, which makes it a very appropriate place to be making green energy with hydro. So the peninsula, we think, has been self-sufficient in renewable energy since the first modern schemes were built around the year 2000. And there are many smaller schemes that have been built, which are creating a lot of green energy, much more than we use locally. And a big part of this success story, which is particularly exciting, was due to the construction in 2021 of a 100% community-owned and operated hydro scheme in Bar, which is a place in Morvern. It was owned by the Morvern Community Development Company, which is a registered charity run by the community and in charge of doing good things locally. This scheme has a maximum output of 1.65 megawatts per hour on a wet day, which is quite a lot.
I was like, what does that mean?
Many days. It's quite big.
Is that like a light bulb or like half
it
a
can
Scot?
generate a lot, much more than our needs. It's the largest community-owned hydro in Scotland and probably in Europe, we think.
Wow,
which is quite exciting, and it's something that people in Morvern are very proud of, and it's a nice example again of things that it's doing good things for the environment, but it's also doing good things for the people locally. So balance again.
Yeah, and from my perspective, it's really interesting seeing and comparing that project with the wind farms in Shetland, like both the scale of it, the appropriateness, I suppose, for the landscape it's in, and also, there's a feeling in Shetland that whilst there are benefits from the wind farms, that largely that scheme was imposed on the local population, as opposed to the Morvern schemes where, there's good consultation. I know from seeing and walking around one of the hydro schemes myself, it's really well blended into the landscape. And, it's really nice to see, again, a positive story where humankind's actually working with the landscape so that it benefits the landscape in as much as he can with any, kind of power scheme, but whilst benefiting the local community too. So yeah, it's really great to see that, I think.
So tell us a little bit more about how the actual sounds of the hydro inspired your music making.
I think when we went to visit the hydro schemes, particularly on a really rainy day, we were struck a lot by the sounds of water in different contexts, and there are quite a lot of different spots where you can really hear the power of water, and particularly there's one of the hydro schemes is the design of it is called a screw turbine, and you can see the water pushing around this kind of corkscrew structure, and it's a very powerful sound and a powerful thing to look at, and we've taken field recordings of this, and I think that's definitely going to feed into the music because it's very representative of the power of water and everything that entails.
So tell us about how these experiences throughout the week impacted the music you were making up there.
So that's the hard bit now, isn't it? We've actually got to do the work and write some music. Well, we started improvising, didn't we, really, just to get us off the ground. So, yeah. Yeah,
I think that initially we were almost overwhelmed by how many different things we were finding inspiring. So it was partly just getting our heads around what do we want to focus on. And I think, we certainly took some of the overriding themes we had, things like stewardship of the land, interconnectivity, water. The importance of water is a big one. But then more specific things. So I think we were particularly inspired by our walk around the woodland with Alistair Firth. I think that was a big one. Yeah. I think a big takeaway I had from that, actually, which I think was probably quite important, was when we were asking about kind of layers in the woodland. And we were in this very dense patch of hazel rainforest, and Alistair kind of pointed out that we can't talk about layers, we can't talk about individual trees, individual organisms, it's all one thing. The woodland is a living thing, and we, in that moment, were part of it too. And I think that as an overarching thing was inspiring for us.
And also that detail, the way that Alistair got us looking at the lichens in particular. I mean, it's like my life's transformed now after that. It's like I can't go in a wood without like examining the bark of the trees and looking for those details. And like the whole idea that he said to me, you won't see the bark of the trees in this forest, that it's all covered by lichen. And I think we really want to go for that detail, don't we, of like looking really closely and taking the patterns of the lichens as an inspiration for the music itself.
Yeah. Speaking of lichen, because it seems like it's a hot topic here, you experimented with graphic scores inspired by the patterns of lichen. So tell us about patterns of lichen, and also how does one sort of create and interpret these quite unusual scores?
I was actually amazed by how varied they are, and we're hoping that we can put a video together for the performance so that people can actually see these on the screen, which I'm sorry we can't do on the podcast, but if you visit the Nordic Viola blog you will see some pictures of them. And so we started thinking, well, I wonder if we can actually make music just from the shapes of the lichens. So some of them we're literally taking the shape and copying that in the musical contours. Some of them we're taking, like there's one called Old Man's Beard, which is it's kind of quite fuzzy, isn't it, and kind of quite wiry and fragile looking. So we're creating a sort of texture that mirrors that. So really just having a bit of fun with how the lichens look and the thoughts and emotions that those shapes inspire in us.
Yeah, I think kind of going into it I mean, lichen is really the important thing when it comes to rainforest. It's kind of the indicator of if you've got these specific species, that means okay, rainforest, or it means this is really good rainforest because we've got this really rare one. So knowing that there is that variety, and I think there's something musically related about texture and color. But I think specifically we began to think, oh wow, this is an idea when we discovered the script lichens, and I just thought that looks like text. It looks like hieroglyphics in a way.
It does.
It really does.
Yeah.
And then when we saw you can actually trace a line, we thought that can be translated to music. So definitely experimenting with pick a line each and just play it, pretend it's music, and go. And it was exciting. Gave us a kind of connection to the trees in a way. We're kind of reading them.
And we'll be actually sort of improvising during that performance from that material, and building up the busyness of the forest as well, from this kind of micro detail up to the whole feel of the rainforest.
You've written pieces about lichen before, am I right in saying?
Definitely have. Long time fascination.
You've been a lichen gal for a long time.
Just the perspective thing. I love the idea of like zooming in on like tiny things where you're looking at it through a magnifying glass, and just it's refreshing perspective on life, because you don't often pay that much attention to tiny things. We actually found that we were recycling home, we're just looking at the verges and like look at all those, look at the bustling life there that we would have just passed by.
Wouldn't have noticed. Yeah, that's amazing. And so while you were up there, you put on a project at the Community Woodland Workshop. What did that entail, and what are your plans for the future with that?
Well, over the course of Wing and a Prayer, I've been collecting responses from audiences as well, and finding out what concerns and what they've noticed. And so long term, I want to find ways of expressing those thoughts that we've gathered. So we also want to very much connect with the communities we're with. So we thought that we would try running a workshop in Morvern and get people from the local community there and enjoy that space. Actually, I think Lisa will probably have something to say about the community woodlands as well. But just to encourage people to listen and, relate what they're hearing, experiment a little bit. Actually, we were picking things up and seeing what sounds we could make, as well as the sounds that already existed there. And then we spent a lovely bit of time on the beach with a few instruments that Lisa had at home, eating Lisa's fabulous chocolate cookies, which were going down an absolute treat.
Tell me more.
You'll have to come to a workshop, Aileen.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, just having fun, just playing with those sounds, replicating them, responding to them with instruments, and just see where that takes us, and look at doing more in the future with that, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was a really, really nice event. It's the Morvern Community Woodlands is a space that's very well loved locally, and everyone sort of feels like they know it inside out. I certainly do, and all the things we've had going on there in the past, and it's just a nice place to go for walks and that kind of thing. But to experience it with a different set of ears on was it was refreshing for me. You don't often, it's like with noticing the lichens in a way. It's just taking a minute to take a little bit more notice of what's going on. And yes, when we were making music on the beach, it was with that kind of refreshed set of ears that we were listening to each other and engaging, but also listening to the sounds around us, and it was a very special moment.
And we were very lucky when we got an absolutely perfect sunny day. So
even up in Morvern with the
even up in Morvern,
Wow.
yeah. So we had plenty of time and space to sit and be together. And I think the mental health benefits of just switching off from day-to-day life and listening and sharing with each other, I think was really valuable.
Yeah, I think it was interesting for us just to hear other people's perspectives on the sounds as well, and we had a really good mix of people with different expertise from different art forms even, who were kind of chipping in their thoughts and giving us a whole new perspective on the things that we thought we were hearing.
Yeah.
And so going forward, the music you have written will be paired with the music from Icelandic composer Anna Thorvaldsdottir and Judith Weir. How does their music echo your themes and sound worlds?
I chose Anna's piece first and foremost because I felt that a lot of the textures in her music are similar to what Lisa writes, lots of extended techniques, and really it's written for string trio and really exploring what string instruments can do beyond just playing melody. And Anna too is really interested in nature, and that often appears in her work. So I kind of felt it was a good parallel to Lisa's work. So.
Yeah, I'm just very excited to be playing it. I'm a big fan. I think we had it was interesting having those two pieces again. Yeah, the Judith Weir piece as well. Big fan of that. Two pieces that we love, and using them as a way to shape our program a little bit, and using kind of working with the narrative of the whole program and finding ways of transitioning between the pieces, and they certainly reflect a lot of the kind of musical moods we're going for, but also themes.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we're wanting to sort of show that transition. I suppose initially just getting our ear in with Judith's piece, Atlantic Drift, the idea of being near the sea and in the west coast of Scotland. And then Anna's music is quite bleak, and we're sort of using that to transition into that idea of being in a world where there are issues with climate and habitat, but then transitioning out again and looking at these positive stories that we have.
Ending on a high.
Ending on a high, most definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so the performance you have coming up on Saturday, the 27th of July, might I say, in the cutest chapel ever, from what I saw on Google Images, St Columba's Chapel in Drimnin, Morvern. What can people expect?
Well, we want them to really enjoy where the chapel is, I think, first of all. And
what a spot.
Yeah.
And it's a spot that's surrounded by rainforest, so that's particularly appropriate.
Yeah, so absolute perfect setting for it. And we're going to be a string trio, so there'll be Lisa playing violin, myself on viola, and Ruth Rowlands on cello. It'll be a mixture of fixed scores and improvised scores, and I guess we want to take them on the journey we experienced, don't we, really, in Morvern. And
Amazing. Well, most importantly, where can folk get tickets?
Okay, so we will leave a link in the text box underneath this podcast, but you can also look up On a Wing and a Prayer Morvern on Eventbrite, so that's eventbrite.co.uk, and tickets will be on sale there. Or you can visit my website, which is nordicviola.wordpress.com, and look for the forthcoming concerts page, and there'll be a link on there. But again, we'll put everything in the text box for you, and follow us both on social media as well.
Absolutely, so no excuse. So what does the future hold for Nordic Viola and the On a Wing and a Prayer project?
I feel a little bit sad at the moment because I'm only short-term sad, I hope.
Okay.
Just coming to the end of what's been an absolutely amazing year in these 3 places, and I really feel the project's developed as, you know, I've kind of got my ear in and my eye in, and kind of felt how the music connects in with the community. So the good news is very much want to carry it forward into the next year, so we'll be seeking financial means to do that. I have to do a project in my home area of Stirling. There's lots going on there, so that will definitely be happening. And I hope to go to Orkney and work with somebody there as well. There's also so much more to be got out of this year as well. We've been making recordings as we go along, and hope to release recordings of the music by Renzo and myself, and Lisa and myself. And probably first off the mark will be the concert we recorded with Pete and Joe Stollery. So that's a big part for next year, going ahead and making those recordings. And also, as we've just talked about, trying to extend the outreach work with it, and get more voices into the project and more creativity from the community. So so sad that we're coming to the end of phase 1 of it, but very, very excited at what can happen going forward, I think.
Phase 2.
Yeah.
Okay, more to come.
More to come.
Look out for that. Amazing.